My first job with a camera that paid money was working as a stringer for the ABC. I sort of accidentally got that job while I was school teaching. The Department of Education said I had to cease and desist filming for someone outside the organisation of the Department of Education, and the ABC offered me a job as an assistant cameraman. At that level it's all care and no responsibility, and the rest is a lot of bloody hard work. My first movie was The Adventures of Barry Mackenzie. It was the first, or one of the first films financed by the Film Bank. The Film Bank was set up by John Gorton. He got Bruce Beresford to organise it, and as you do, Bruce financed his own film as one of the first. I think Romeo and Juliet was one of my best films. Fundamentally, it was a low-budget film. It was a massive success, and I based that success on one particular instant. I was shooting The Edge in Canada. The film was being released the first Saturday, went to the theatre, and there were queues around the block to get in, all mostly young girls. The noise in that cinema was amazing. It was deafening. The kids were all screaming and yelling, and I thought, this is going to be the biggest disaster. With Shakespeare dialogue amongst all this bloody noise, it's just going to be chaos. And anyway, the film comes up, the opening scene happens, and there's a wave of absolute silence over the whole cinema. They were totally involved, and the only noise we heard from the beginning to end was the occasional sobbing in the background. And at that point I knew I'd been part of something very, very special. I have been offered actual films to direct. I would be better than half the directors I've worked with, but the other half are such wonderful people to work with, and I could never achieve their brilliance, and I'm very, very happy to stay taking a part in developing their creativity. The main benefit for joining the society is that you're going to mix with like people, and you're going to learn a lot about facets of the industry that you wouldn't otherwise. I haven't participated in the organisation of the thing as much as I would have loved to, but the nature of my feature work and going overseas and all the rest of it, I just couldn't give it the commitment that I thought you have to do if you're going to take part in the structure of an organisation like this. People just say, when you retire, when will you retire? And it's the day I don't get a script. I've shot close to 60 feature films now, but there's only been one time that I've ever had a bad experience with a director. The situation was political in as much as it was a film called The Earthling, and it was one of the first major American films to come to be shot in Australia, directed by an Englishman. I won't even mention his name. The whole film was one of, after dailies, he'd be screaming to me, "Why the F don't you quit?" And I'd say, "Why the F don't you fire me?" And it was the only bad experience I've had with a director in all those things. And I didn't quit for political reasons, and it was probably the right thing to do. But we stuck it out. The most difficult film I think I have shot so far, is A Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The difficulty was, of course, that you couldn't use any lighting in the jungle. It was all shot in not a set, but in practical jungle. And you put one light up and all it lit was the nearest tree, and threw nasty shadows over everything. So you just couldn't use any lighting. And just winging it the whole time. And because we were in Mexico, you never saw the dailies, so it was blind flying. The director was at the peak of his career, and it was just wonderful to work with him, John McTiernan. And Arnold was a lot of fun. There was some friction between him and the director, nothing serious. and he'd use me as the go-between. The best joke about Arnold was he genuinely came out one morning with rewrites in his hand and walked over and grabbed McTiernan by the scruff of the neck and almost lifted him off the ground and said, as a joke, "John, I do 3 lines. There's 4 here." And that to me was Arnold's great strength. He has never pretended to be the great actor. He's just Arnold Schwarzenegger hamming it up. When I first was the Hollywood cameraman, you flew first class to Los Angeles. Now, of course, the best of us are getting paid half at least, or probably the same money, but it's in truth half, if not less, for the same work. It was ridiculous in the way it was in the good old days. I mean, it was the glamour of Hollywood and people were throwing money around. But I think it's a little more healthy today. Director of photography, in theory, you were the only one on the set who knew exactly what it was going to look like tomorrow. Well, that was the lie that was foisted around. In truth, the operator was the only person who knew exactly what happened in front of the camera. Of course, then video split came, and that diminished the operator. The overall thing has not changed. You, as a director of photography, have to get in the head of a director, understand what he wants out of the script, and interpret that with your camera and your lighting. And it's that relationship between you and the director and your ability to interpret that in lighting and camera work that'll keep you working. The rest of it's bullshit. The film industry, wrong input, will become totally the digital industry. I just think the digital camera is such a precise, predictable instrument compared to film that it's I would never ever go back to it. I've never lit it flat and sorted it out later. I've exposed it right in the middle, and I was doing that generally with film for the last, since I really understood what the digital intermediate could do. Gather all the information that you can on the negative or the chip, and then you can regulate it later on. But if you haven't got all the information, you've lost options. What's the way to become a successful cinematographer? And the answer is very simple: just shoot. Keep shooting, keep shooting, keep shooting. If you're any good and a little lucky, somebody will notice. If you're no good, then you'll have a lot of fun with the process anyway. My whole career evolved in front of me. I got the job at the ABC because the Department of Education wiped me out. I got my first film because 3 of the people, when I was chief cameraman at Film Australia, that I'd recommended weren't what Bruce Beresford wanted, and he'd seen a little film of mine and he asked me to go. And in New York, 3 of my best Australian films happened within a week, which is blind luck, and out of that Mazursky asked me to do Tempest, and out of that I was put on the A-list of cameramen around the world. I guess it all happened basically because I kept working and people could see what I did. And I think that's the way it always happens. And if I had my life again, I'd try and make it happen like that again. In any deal I do, which is always done through an agent, and the agent knows now, my wife is included as part of the deal. My job is so demanding that the more normal life I can have, the better my work's going to be. And of course my wife is a massive part in that normality. I maintain a sort of a social separateness from the crew, which is what I really need to physically and mentally give them what I can. I refuse to get dragged into the politics of fear, which is really, really strong in the major. And you'll find people do it once or twice, and when they realise it's not working, they try some other way to cajole you. All that emanates from the fact that I just would not do a movie if my wife wasn't there. I was looking up at old geezers like me and wondering with great wonder, would one day ever I get the chance to do what they're doing. As it happened, I have.